Yes.
Hello and welcome to Tech Talks. I'm Jan Free.
And I'm Hannah.
And we are your hosts for today. We are both college juniors majoring in management information systems and founding members of TechOpps, aspiring for a career in the tech industry. Just to recap, in the last episode of Tech Talks, we had Derek share his experience working as a recruiting coordinator at Google, a talent coordinator for Netflix, and an HR specialist for the US Army Reserve. He shared insightful points on setting your own career path. So Hannah, who is joining us today?
Okay. So joining us today is Si Hefty. Sai Hefty,
Software
a
engineer.
software engineer intern at HubSpot.
Um,
Um,
Hi, Sai.
Sai,
Thanks
thanks
for
for
joining
joining us
today.
today.
Would
Why
you like to
don't you
introduce
introduce
yourself
yourself
to
to
our
our
viewers?
viewers?
Sorry, I'm getting just a little bit of feedback. Could you repeat that? It sounds like someone may have their mic on.
Okay. Um, Joining us today is Sai Hefty, a software engineer at intern at HubSpot. And thank you for joining us today, Sai. Why don't you introduce yourself to our viewers?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. So I'm going into my fourth year at Georgia Tech as a computer science undergrad, and I'll be starting a master's there the fall after. I have a little bit of slides prepared for you guys, if that's okay.
Yeah, okay, sure. Go ahead.
Oh,
Great.
yeah.
And sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I'll
So,
go through the slides. It should be about 15 minutes, and then I can open up to any questions, if that's all right.
Okay,
all right.
sure.
Great, thanks.
Hold on. Okay, our tech is trying to show the deck. Okay, there we go.
Okay. Yeah, so can everyone see my screen actually, just to make sure?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So the thing I wanted to talk about today is making the most out of your education this fall semester. The main target for this group is any computer science students going into their first, second, third, or fourth year of college. Just as a disclaimer, I want to mention that I don't consider myself an expert on any of these things. I'm just a student, and I'm going to be showing a bit of data around universities and COVID. I consider this data to be from reliable sources I've found online, a lot of them being like national resources like the CDC, but I know it's really hard to get accurate data right now, so take everything with a grain of salt. So I want to provide a little bit of context about why I want to talk about this. The first thing being that college is getting a lot more expensive. We're paying more than ever right now to get our degrees, and we're probably not going to see this price drop anytime soon. So we really need to make the most out of the time that we have as students. But here's the problem. The time that we have as students is going to look a lot different this fall. So the Chronicle of Higher Education has been tracking the instruction plans for this fall at around 1,200 colleges, and as of yesterday, nearly half of them are already planning not to hold classes completely in person. Many are opting for this hybrid model where we have some remote classes and some in-person classes, and some, like Harvard, have already moved completely online. And I couldn't find any great resources to confirm this, and this is mostly anecdotal, but if you look at the majority of universities in the US over the past few months, it's very clear that nearly every school in the country is rapidly changing their plans. As universities are scrambling to have their facilities ready for the fall, they're running into a ton of unknowns, and because of this, so many schools are gravitating towards doing entirely remote classes or hybrid classes. And I think that we're going to see the number of hybrid and online models being used shoot up a lot before August. So why is this changing so much when it's only a month away from the actual return to class? Well, I think it should be pretty obvious. It's hard to get perfectly accurate numbers, but it's pretty clear that in the US, we're not doing a great job at preventing COVID. And the issue is projections for the next month look even worse than right now. These are several different forecasts that were reported by the CDC about what August might look like for the number of national deaths from COVID. And as you can see, this doesn't look like the spread is going to slow down. And in about a month, millions of students are going to be traveling across the states to head back to school. Every college campus is going to have tens of thousands of people living in tightly packed apartment complexes within a couple miles of each other. So it's really hard to predict how this is going to affect the spread of COVID. So to return to my original point, if you're a student, then regardless of your college's plans for the fall right now, the trends with the pandemic are really hard to predict, which means there's a good chance that your classes will be either remote from the beginning or they may switch to remote in the middle of the semester, which is very much like what the spring and the summer looked like for most of you guys, right? So colleges are preparing for this to happen, and faculty are having a lot more time to prepare for this transition than they did during the spring. Hopefully meaning that moving online will be a lot less problematic for everyone than it was in the spring. But all the important parts of going to college, which are, meeting other students, joining clubs, doing research, playing sports, watching sports, all the things that we do to help build our career and find new interests might go away this fall for a bit. And not only that, but tuition is not changing to reflect this. According to a recent CNBC article, in a survey of 13,000 college undergrads, 93% said tuition should be lowered if classes are going to be remote. But it's pretty clear that most universities aren't going to be lowering their tuition regardless of how they conduct their classes this year. At the beginning of July, Harvard announced that their classes would be entirely online and they would be charging full tuition. And since then, we've seen a lot of universities also announce that tuition will stay the same at their schools. This brings up the question, is it worth paying full tuition for an education that's completely through your laptop? A writer for the student newspaper at Harvard called The Crimson wrote that charging full tuition implies the entire Harvard experience can be replicated in full on a laptop, sending a striking message about what Harvard believes to be the value of the education it provides. So this begs the question, is college worth it right now? Well, ultimately that's up to you, and that's not what I'm here to talk about. My point is that as students, we're going to be facing a lot of setbacks in the coming months. So if we want to keep developing our careers, we really need to utilize all the resources that we have right now. So how do you make the most out of this fall? Well, I've compiled some of my ideas here, and these are just based on what I've personally been doing over the past few months and what I plan to continue doing. And another disclaimer, the content I'm going to share with you on this it's purely anecdotal. It's about what's worked for me being a computer science major. And I don't pretend to know about much outside of being a computer science major. And I would also like to preface that, whether we're students or recent grads on the call who have been, if you're previously employed before the pandemic started, then we're really lucky to be in a field where we aren't generally as impacted by this pandemic as other fields might be. It's really fortunate that so many businesses back in March were able to tell their software engineers, okay, take your laptop with you when you go home today. We're going to be remote for a long time. And that's been the biggest change that a lot of us have had due to the pandemic, at least as far as our jobs go. A lot of other industries, it's been much more challenging working through the pandemic right now. So first, I think that a top priority as a student is minimizing how much content you're going to lose if a course moves to an online format. I think these points are kind of obvious, but the main idea here is that for me personally, my main goal of this fall is to take courses that I don't think will be suffered too much if I suddenly need to move them online, Any lab classes right now in particular are going to be especially difficult to navigate around this. I mean, I heard a ton of horror stories in the spring about lab classes being remotely in the middle of the semester, and then things just kind of falling apart from there. And I recognize that a lot of people probably have the same idea, so it'll be hard to register for some of these courses, but it's worth a shot. And my last note is that if you're in a situation where you're able to slow down and take your time with your degree, I'd honestly recommend opting out of doing a full course load so you can explore some other options. Now, what are some of these other options? To me, I think a lot of the best ones usually involve getting in touch with the faculty at whatever school you might be going to. In my experience, the faculty I've worked with have been really receptive in the past to working with students, usually as researchers, research assistants. Now is certainly a difficult time to try to do that for pay, but if that's what you're after, it's certainly worth looking into. And in the case that you're not able to be a research assistant for pay, there's almost always some way to do it for credit if you want that, or just to volunteer. And in my personal experience as an undergrad researcher, I can say this is one of the few times where I've gotten the opportunity to get a lot of guidance on exploring a lot of different topics. And it's been especially valuable getting feedback from people that just have so much experience working on their fields. And it really helped me develop a bit of a passion there for research and helped me solidify whether I wanted to do a master's. Another option I've written is working as a teaching assistant, which, I've never personally done that before, but from what I understand, it's always talked about as a great opportunity to get connected with other students, to get connected with faculty through that, to build your communication skills, and to even, show yourself off as something of a leader through the teaching that you're doing. But the bottom line for both of these is I think they're great opportunities to learn about things you otherwise might not encounter in your career. And you can also get to be a part of some really meaningful work and connect with some really experienced people at your university. And these are both great for building your resume too. So I'm sure that every school works a little bit differently, but in my experience, it feels like at my university, there's a club for like basically everything under the sun. In computer science in particular, it feels like there's a club for every different little aspect of it. In every club, there always seems to be a handful of people that really are passionate about what they're doing. And, participating in clubs like these come with some great opportunities to learn from others and to, build yourself as a leader a bit in these situations. And if there's something you're really passionate about, whether it's something academic or otherwise, and there's no club for it at your school, this is certainly a hard time to try to do this in the middle of a pandemic, but it's always possible to charter your own thing. It's a lot of work to make your own club, and it usually requires getting some kind of sponsorship for it, but you can really learn a lot from doing it, and it's a great way to show to people that you can take a lot of initiative. So making change in my community has been one of the most fulfilling parts of being a student at university. I'm really passionate about this one. To give a bit of background, there was an issue I felt existed at our school for a long time, that being there isn't so much of a focus on the intersection of ethics and technology on our campus. So over the summer, I've started working with a small team of other students to try and bring ethics into our school and start something of a dialogue among students about the ethical issues that we run into in the technology industry in particular. And I also want to get people talking about how we as students can prepare ourselves for standing up to these challenges, after we graduate, after we go into the workforce. So what we've been doing to approach this problem is we've been interviewing a lot of people and talking with administrators and professors and student leaders and other stakeholders at our university about how they feel about this topic and what's feasible for us to do and how to integrate ethics a little more closely into our computer science curriculum, as well as some other ideas like inviting speakers to our campus to get people to talk about these kinds of issues, or to propose some kind of standards that student organizations commit to when they're working on projects, say with those are using sensitive data, right? Because data protection is such an important aspect of ethics right now. It's one of the most talked about things in that. However, not everything needs to be done through your school. I mean, if you want to learn a new programming language today, you can just Google, the word Ruby, and you'll find 100 different Ruby tutorials. And they're all totally free. There's like an overwhelming amount of information out there that you can use to learn things. So, how do you begin prioritizing things like that? How do you know what's going to be most valuable? For me personally, I think that I've figured that out by getting to talk with mentors, which I would like to bring up as one more resource. Getting mentorship seems like a really tough thing to do after you graduate from university. But fortunately, as students, there are often a lot of schools that have an alumni program with a mentorship program through it, where they'll pair alumni up with students, based on their mutual interests, and see if they can find someone who kind of fits into your career goals. And I really recommend programs like these if you're ever unsure about what you want to be doing, or if you're even sure that you're on the right track to achieve where you're trying to go, And generally, LinkedIn is also a really good community for these types of things. Just sending out a connection request to someone with a message saying, "Hey, I love what your company does, and it sounds great, and I've always wanted to be, in this particular role. If you ever have time to chat about this and could give me some pointers on, how I could get there." People usually love talking about those kinds of things. And mentors, just in my experience, they've always been really supportive, and it's a very low commitment. There isn't this expectation for you to be keeping up with them all the time. They've just been a very valuable resource for me overall. Lastly, I just wanted to mention some projects I wanted to mention the importance of doing your own projects. For me, some of the stuff that's really helped me learn how to code has been thinking of projects that I wanted to develop and hashing them out myself. I've tried maybe 12 in the last couple of years, and all of them have drastically failed except for one. But if I hadn't tried to do all of them, then I might have never gotten to that point where I was able to make one and go, "Hey, this is actually kind of cool. I'm glad I, kept trying and I kept staggering and finally getting to something I like." These resources I've listed here are just a couple of communities online for trying to do collaborative personal projects. I don't have a ton of experience working alongside them, but I've mostly heard good things anecdotally. And then I just want to include a couple of resources for anyone that, for whatever reason, if you're not able to learn through your university quite how you want to, and if, personal projects maybe aren't your thing, then I just want to include a couple traditional resources for learning computer science. MIT and Stanford, the first two links I've listed, those are direct recordings of the lectures from both of those universities. And those are lectures from some of the most experienced people in the world on the subjects that they're talking about. They're really, really valuable. Coursera and Udacity are also great for doing project-based learning or getting a little bit of interaction with people as you're going through this. And then LeetCode is just, for anyone who hasn't heard of it, it's just a website for practicing the types of questions you may see during technical interviews, whether that's for internships or full-time careers as software engineers. So with that, thank you for listening to this. I'll be including a list of resources on my personal website. I think this is also getting recorded. And for anyone that's watching this, not live, then please feel free to reach out to me at this email address with any questions you might have. At this time, I'll go ahead and open up to any questions.
All right. Hannah, I think you're muted.
Okay, sorry. Again, we'll be asking
All right.
questions first as hosts,
So,
and then we'll open the floor to our viewers, so that they can interact with you later. So
Yeah.
for my first question,
Yeah.
what advice could you tell college students like ourselves on how to maximize time as we transition into online learning? As you mentioned, there were some ways. So, do you have any time management tips on that?
Uh,
Yeah.
None immediately come to mind on that. I did at some point during my second year, I started just like on a notes app on my phone, I would jot down everything that I'd try to get done in a given day, whether that was kind of a task oriented thing I did though. After a little bit of time, something that worked for me too was I had this kind of ritual where every Sunday night I would pull up this calendar thing, and it was an hourly calendar. Like you really had to track you'd have to write everything down manually, but you needed to. For me, it worked well being that strictly structured, where I would put each hour what I would be doing in this time just to keep myself accountable as I was getting through a week. That one stresses people out a lot. I often hear about like going for the task-oriented thing I mentioned earlier works a little better. One big drawback I think of doing all of this online is just for me personally something that really motivated me when while I was on campus was I felt like I was just surrounded by such a positive environment as far as people were constantly trying to get work done and constantly pushing each other to be as productive as possible. It's certainly something I'm going to kind of miss this fall.
Okay. Yeah, so I think it's also a good it's a good idea to really track everything that we do,
Alright.
um, everything that we do every hour. Because that's what I do also. I have a Google Calendar and then I put everything that I need to do, and then it kind of helps me as well. So, Janpri,
All right. You've mentioned, Sai, that how you're motivated in the campus. But given the current situation, it can be hard for most of us to be productive and motivated in doing things, especially when dedicating our time to online learning. So with that being said, how do we find our motivation here to get it started?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's also I kind of have the same answer for this as when I hear anyone talking about burnout and during a semester where you're taking a ton of hours or when you're just feeling overwhelmed with work. I always like to reflect and ask myself, why am I doing this? What are my long-term goals? How is this going to help me reach my long-term goals? And then a lot of times in some classes there's a very clear answer to that, and sometimes it might just feel like a thing that you're just working towards a deadline and it'll get done and it'll keep moving. But I think ultimately with classes in particular, that's one where constant self-reflection on how each step you're taking along the way is going to help you get to your career goal is really valuable for not necessarily. I feel silly for almost saying it, but it's not even necessarily motivation for me. It's like discipline. It's like convincing myself that it'll be worth staying up another hour to study for that test or continuing to try to get those last 3 points on a project or whatever.
okay. So yeah, I think that's a good insightful tip as well. So speaking of tips, do you have any tips on building our profiles during this pandemic? Because we're very restricted right now to move. So what do you suggest that students do to be able to build their portfolios and really just maximize their time?
Yeah, good question. For me, kind of going back to the personal projects, and that's always kind of been my go-to. I think that we have our classes that we can take, and we can stack those as much as we want. But ultimately, those are going to give you the same thing that everyone else gave you, or that they gave everyone else. And the things that will make us stand out, the things that help us kind of go above, are what are we going to have to talk about that we did outside of our courses? And for me, I think keeping track of personal projects and my ideas for personal projects has been real helpful. The one I mentioned in my talk that out of 12 attempts at making that finally went successfully, that was something I came up with when I was, I think, 17 years old, and I had no idea how to program out. I'd never written a line of code before, pretty much. I had tried to make it at some point at that age, and I was like, okay, I have no idea how to do this. Maybe I should do it someday. And then I tried all these other things, failed, and then there was just like a day last spring where I thought, you know what, I think I can finally try that now. And it ended up going okay, and I was like, it was a good booster because it became something I could talk about, interviews with other businesses, or as I was looking for other internships, and it it diversified my portfolio in a way I couldn't really think of anything else. So personal projects are certainly helpful. I think looking for a big thing for me has been opening my eyes up a bit, and looking for problems that I think, hey, why isn't a solution for this? Why don't we try that out? Why don't we see what we can do to fix that? So I think part of it is just a matter of being a little more aware, I guess. It's about being willing to look for things where you didn't necessarily expect.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so
That
that's
we
very
can.
insightful,
Okay.
Sai. So we have a last question. Last question time as a student and as an intern, since you're interning at HubSpot.
Sorry, we didn't hear your question, Janpri. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, can you repeat?
Hello.
Okay, you're choppy.
Can you hear me, Hanba? Hello.
Yes. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. So to repeat my question, Sai, how do you balance your time as a student and as an intern since you're interning at HubSpot?
Sure. To be honest, it's been a lot of work. Partially working a 40-hour week, and then I'm taking one course right now that is just a 3-hour class, and then I'm also involved with my university right now with student government. But in terms of managing time, I would say it's just a matter of alternating based on the given days. Sometimes I'm the type of person that if I work on the same problem for I could work 5 days for 2 hours each day, which is 10 hours total, or I could work one day for 10 hours, and I would get so much more productivity out of a 10-hour day, just because I'm having one problem stuck in my head the whole time. For some reason, I'm able to be a little more efficient that way. I'm sorry I don't have a great answer for specifically managing that time. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. So now, thank you for answering our questions. That's it from our side. Now we'll be opening up the questions to our audience. So if you guys have any questions, please message it in the chat box, or you can open your mics and cameras to interact with Sai himself and really ask him personally. Okay. Janfrey? Okay,
It looks
sorry.
like there are a few in the chat. Should I
Yeah.
start? Okay.
Okay, sure.
Okay, so the first one I see is, how do we know how to choose mentors? Really good question. For me, it's been it's a lot less selective than you think. I think that despite some of the mentors I've had in the past not necessarily being like specifically software engineers, they 100% have helped me a lot with just the general parts of figuring out what I want to do with my career. I don't think mentors necessarily will help you figure out exactly what you want to do, but they're very skilled at helping you know whether something is the right fit. And I guess it's more a matter of, I guess everyone gets a little bit different thing out of their mentor, and you don't necessarily have to be 100% what's the word, on the same page with them as far as, they don't need to have exactly the career that you want to have to not be able to provide a lot of valuable input for how you can get to figuring. And in relation to that, how do we ask people to be our mentors? I personally haven't really had to do that in the past. With my previous jobs, I've usually just been assigned one. The Alumni Association at my university, they actually give us an option where they give you like a big list, and you get to pick 5 based on whatever attributes are listed. Like it gives you like their role, their company, their personal hobbies, like the degree they graduated with, the year they graduated with, and so on. As far as reaching out to people, the way that I had kind of talked about in the lecture, though, I would say that starting off with a small question like, hey, do you think you could jump on a call with me for 30 minutes at some point to talk about your role at Facebook or Google or wherever, and what it's like being a machine learning engineer. Could you tell me a bit about that, and how you got there, and what you would recommend to someone who's in their early 20s or going into college that is doing their best to get to that point. Building the connection with your mentor. So I think that's something that I'm not sure how you build it. I guess personally I was just never too scared to just like kind of start talking about all the concerns I have and just throw it out there for them to have to field. Yeah, so I don't have a much better answer than just kind of, if you could clarify, Benedict, I could maybe give you a little more on that one. Pablo asks, is it worth it to pay $400 for Udacity? So I've never actually enrolled in Udacity as a nano degree. I've just done a lot of their free programs for that. Obviously, literally the only difference between paying and enrolling in the free version, I think, is that you get the nano degree, right? You have a certificate that states that you completed it. I really have no idea, honestly, what the marketability of the nano degree is. So I'm sorry I can't say too much on that. Benedict also asked, do I recommend taking a gap year? So as I mentioned at some point, I said, it's college worth it. I said, well, that's up to you. I also at the same time, I think taking a gap year is ultimately your decision. I think that it's objectively right now, students are going to be facing a lot of challenges as incoming CS students, but ultimately you can't really know how much that might affect your experience in college until you get there. How do you deal with burnout, especially now that we're stuck at home? That's a rough question. I take a lot personally. Occasionally I will just have to take like mental health days where I don't really look at any particular screen for a little while and try not to think about work for a little bit. Do other you guys have anything on any of these? I'm sorry, I probably should have been mentioning that. Hannah or John Free?
Okay, yeah, sorry.
I was just going to ask if any of the ones that I've asked, if either of you had any recommendations.
Oh, so for dealing with burnout, especially now that we're stuck at home, I think Justin also had a follow-up question here. Does having a creative outlet help overcome it? So I guess it does. It helps in a way that we're not stuck in our little holes of just coding and programming the whole day, because it's something really tiring to do, especially when you just sit in front of your screen. So I think that that's a way that could help, having a creative outlet. How about you, Janfrey?
Yeah, I think it would be good to also have other hobbies aside from just learning or just studying, so that I think just to de-stress from it, it would be good to lessen the burnout.
Yeah, absolutely. I certainly, there are days where I need to, I actually just started getting into like writing music through some of the fancy software that you can use now to make that. Like, if anyone is interested in this, Ableton Live is a really nice, it's like a deluxe, like industry grade thing. And they're doing a 90-day free trial right now if you're at all interested in making a little bit of music. I really recommend it. How did you start the movement about ethics in computer science? Yeah, so someone actually, there was a Twitter thread where someone had brought up something that happened involving a data leak that occurred, and one of the platform, or not, the platform that my SGA administration is focusing on, one of the topics on there is about data accountability and stewardship, and I thought, oh, like, what's this about? This sounds like something we should look into a little bit. So I talked with the person who had initially caught what happened, and from there we've recruited a couple other people that have mutual interest in promoting responsibility with how people are managing data. And it's really impressive how passionate people can get about these kinds of things. And it's expanded now to be about integrating ethics a little more closely into the curriculum, because after talking with faculty and administration at a few different schools, the consensus has kind of been that there should be a little more emphasis on that. There's something really interesting at Stanford where they do an ethics class where it's actually taught by like three people, like a public policy professor, a ethics professor, and a computer science professor. And you actually have to, it's not just like essays about ethics, they actually do programming assignments involving it. And like, it's a really comprehensive and interesting class. A lot of students say it's like their favorite course there. How do you talk to your mentor? So like a play-by-play of talking to your mentor. I typically, when I reach out to mine, I just say, hey, do you have half an hour sometime this week to talk about this? I'm working on a new project or something, or I'm having trouble deciding whether I want to do grad school or whatever, right? And then we'll book some time, and I like to keep a couple of notebooks where I just keep track of all the questions that I have and some of the arguments I have one way or the other, and then present this all to them. So it's like a big like brain dump, and then they're like, oh my gosh, you talk way too much sometimes. And then they explain to me their ideas based on what I said, which like the term rubber ducking in computer science, where you're just speaking out loud to, like, you explain it to a rubber duck, and then you hope that as you're explaining it, you catch a bug in your code. it's kind of the same thing there, where sometimes just having an outlet to talk to someone about this will make it, like, as you're saying it, it's almost crystal clear, and then they catch it like, oh, so you clearly want to do this, and you were just in your own head too much about it. So yeah, talking to them, I normally just want to prepare a little bit and have a few questions ready for them. And mentors they're people too. Obviously, like, be polite to them, check in with them, ask them how they're doing. Make sure they're doing okay. John Anderson asks, do you have any tips for people to protect their data? Could you clarify if you mean, like, if it's me, is that me protecting my data, or is it me protecting someone else's data that they gave to me? I'm assuming it's the second one. There are a ton of, I guess that question almost kind of encompasses what, like, a security division is. Can we all connect? Yeah, absolutely. Oh, protecting your own data. Yeah. That's, I don't know a ton about it. It's really difficult to protect your data in some cases these days, honestly. Like, I mean, if you want to use Facebook or Amazon or Google or Gmail or a lot of different things, you kind of have to make the concession that some of your data will be used to have things marketed towards you, or to sell some analytics things. It's just kind of a matter of what you feel personally is, what's the word? Like, there are some things where, let's say you want to buy a new TV, right? And it's, like, surprisingly cheap. Well, it could turn out that the TV has, like, a light sensor in it that will, it's marketed to you as it'll sell. It'll adapt the lighting it'll adapt the backlight based on the lighting. But what isn't necessarily mentioned to you, but is included in the privacy policy, is that light sensor is also able to detect movement, and because of that, they might be keeping track of that, and they can use that data to analyze the activity going on in your home, and they might sell that to people that are trying to market towards you at a certain time, or towards anyone at whatever time they expect a house to be the most active. Things like that, they're pretty hard to get around that, because privacy policies are just so incredibly long and difficult to read. So, I feel like you just have to, whenever you're making a purchase or whenever you're using a service that's free, ask yourself, now, how are they making money off of this? And, everyone has a different level of comfortability with how they might be using that. Light sensor in your room that knows when you're active, maybe that doesn't make you too uncomfortable. But, like, if someone is selling a camera that will rate the outfits that you keep in your closet, and you're supposed to hook a camera up to your closet, then maybe you're not as comfortable doing something like that.
Okay. So I guess that's it from our audience. And again, if you have any questions, this is the last call for questions. So if you have any questions, please do message it in the chat box, or you can open your mics and cameras before we proceed to the concluding question. So anyone, the floor is yours. Okay.
I have a question. Great. Well, first of all, Sai, thank you so much for the your presentation. Honestly, like, I was looking for something like that. Just so you know, I'm one of the founders of Fiesta, so of this app. So again, thank you so much for doing this, and sharing your insights. One of the things that actually we're trying to do is we're trying to really target sort of the universities, which I thought your presentation was actually very informative, and so I certainly sort of appreciate, because to your point is the biggest thing that we see is are universities really going to charge the same amount, kind of what you were referring to, the same amount that they've been charging for, like you know, 4 or 5 Zoom classes, right, for your biology, chemistry, or, you know, computers, whatever sort of whatever subject you're taking, and therefore a lot of them is saying, well, yes, we're still charging the same thing, and so, you know, it seems like that, well, that's kind of like unfair, given that it's not really the same experience. So I guess, you know, in terms of that, given what you said, and given sort of what Fiesta is sort of transitioning over to, because Fiesta is kind of like a combination of Eventbrite. You have a marketplace of events with Zoom. Obviously, we're not using Zoom. We have our own video conferencing with like social media elements. Like we're all in the next couple of weeks, we're releasing a couple of really cool things where we're gamifying sort of like students, like, or just participants attending sort of the app. So you know, we feel that there's a really big opportunity there that you were alluding of using Fiesta to really target, like, to create this like community, so that people like are engaging. And like you said, you know, like if you're in sort of like the like into computer science, there's like a club for every single sort of computer science thing out there, right? Which is, you know, or if you're like into like the business, there's like entrepreneurship club, and there's a finance club, and there's an investment club. I remember when I was in school, I was in the entrepreneurship club, and I was in investment club, and there's like all these different clubs to be part of. So what do you think is there some sort of you know, sort of opportunity there for Fiesta? And like how would you sort of go about it to like capitalize on, because, you know, as you said, like there's a really big opportunity where the university are really need to sort of like build a community and offer so much more. And with what we have with Fiesta, I think we can definitely do that with, you know, adding a few more things. But what are your thoughts there? I know it's a little bit of a complicated question. I'd just really like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, that's kind of tough to necessarily answer in one succinct response. Part of it, and this is coming from someone who is working alongside like you know, some administration and some of the other student government cabinet members. I personally, right now, it's very difficult to get an audience with nearly anybody in the kind of the upper echelons of education right now, just because they have been dealing with so much in preparation for this fall semester, and it's been really really difficult. I feel like so many people have been working like 12-hour days. It's like, I don't know how I don't know how they're doing it. It's really difficult. I certainly think you know, it's 100% worth it to reach out to them to see if they would be interested partnering in that type of thing. I just think it would be tough to get an audience right now.
Well, then to your point, if you say, okay, because they're trying to sort of like prepare everything, so then is there sort of the opportunity is like as soon as school starts, right? Like in 4 weeks, 4 to 5 weeks, like once they start, now they're like, okay, we've gotten to this point where at least classes started, and so now it's like, now let's figure out how do we like provide that like a sense of community. So you know, maybe if we're not reaching out to them right now, but then, you know, in 4 to 5 weeks, and how would you, given that you're also involved with some sort of organizations, like for example, if Fiesta was reaching out to you, what would be something that would be really appealing? We're just trying to sort of understand how to best approach sort of like college students or sort of organizations that would be like, well, if there was an app or something or sort of activities that remote, right, that it did this, that would be really appealing for me as a college student, as a sort of like you know, somebody who organizes and somebody who's involved with like different organizations.
Right. So I think it'd be a bit of a tough sell, just because I think with most universities already having some kind of partnership with some form of teleconferencing, it might be difficult to propose the use case in a way that students in particular would be able to quickly find the distinction between, you know, like at Georgia Tech, we use Blue Jeans for doing these kinds of things, and there might be a case of just what's the word? kind of like an uncertainty about if it's an altogether distinctly separate service that could be done in-house.
Hmm.
I feel like sometimes universities have kind of a, what's the word? They're partial to doing things their own way sometimes. But I certainly encourage trying to reach out and see how receptive they might be.
Okay. And just last question. So what are your thoughts on Fiesta, right? Separate from sort of the universities, just Fiesta as a platform, again, combining the sort of the marketplace with video conferencing, with like social media elements, where it's kind of like combine Eventbrite with Zoom, with like Instagram/TikTok. What do you think of that as just a platform?
Sure. So today's actually the first day I've used it. I mean, I haven't had any problems with it. It's worked real well from like an infrastructure point.
Okay.
What? Just out of curiosity, how many different cameras could be turned on right now? Is there like a limit, or what is the limit?
The limit is right now 16
Yeah.
at the same time. And we're expanding that. We at one point we've had calls where we've had like up to like 40. It just kind of slows things down. So we're working obviously on scaling. It's kind of like the typical kind of like scaling sort of issue. But the video conferencing right now it's 16. Like people can right now are you using your computer or your phone?
I'm on my laptop.
Okay, yeah. So so when you use your phone, there's like like if you tap on the screen at the bottom right, you should see an icon with 4 squares, and that should you should be able to see sort of like the different people who are on there. But yeah, through the phone, there's some sort of gamification kind of thing that we're launching. One of the biggest things we're launching is like being able to say, like right now we're talking, right? And so starting right now, I ask you a question and say like, okay, what's one of the things that you really like about your internship, and you start sort of replying, or what's one of the things that you really feel that a university is going to struggle with as a student, and you start answering. And so we would record that 10-15 second clip, and then we download to the phone with a Fiesta watermark and sort of your handle, and then we can share that on LinkedIn or like Twitter, Facebook, or like all these other platforms. Because to me, one thing that's outdated, right, is the way people are sharing links, right? It's like, oh, I invite you to this event. Here's the link, or here's a flyer. What if now there was like little trailers and we made that super easy? So that's one of the sort of the things that we're doing. There's like 3 or 4 other like really cool things, sort of gamification, and that is actually we got that from TikTok. So TikTok, where you can download the video and post it on Instagram, and people will see it on Instagram, and then go to TikTok, right? So so gamification things, which for example on the Zoom call or like other platforms, video conferencing platforms, they don't really have that. And so we're trying to sort of really, we think that if we can get gamification right, because that'll just make event hosts, like for example, like TechOpps, much easier for TechOpps to grow if we can offer that additional functionality that they can't find anywhere else. And then therefore they're like, oh, let's just like start sharing, clips of this event, like 10-15 second clips on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, all over the place. Mm-hmm.
Got it. Yeah, that would be really cool to integrate that a little more closely with those.
Well, thank you. Appreciate your feedback and your insight.
Yeah, thanks for joining.
Okay, so I guess we can proceed to our concluding question. So for that, our question is, what is something you think that you still need to learn as that would greatly help your current career, and as you go through, as we all go through this pandemic?
That's a very good question. One thing for me has been finding my limit. I feel like I push myself just a little more each semester as I'm trying to find out where I'm able to grow most comfortably, because I feel like there's always kind of a what's the word? There's a trade-off between learning as much as you can and not stressing yourself out too much. It's kind of like I think it's a Yerkes-Dodson curve, where the stress curve, where performance goes up with stress until you get too stressed out and your performance starts getting a bit worse. I think that finding where I'm most comfortable, um, balancing my time between getting work done and like kind of developing my career as opposed to relaxing a bit and not having to think about stuff and getting the opportunity to just like sit on my laptop and make music or watch watch Ozark on Netflix. Great show, by the way. The time to get to just hang out for a bit as opposed to the time where I'm actively doing work things. I guess that's what I'm trying to learn right now is the right balance.
Yeah, okay. I think that's something that all of us, especially students, would really relate to because we tend to like overwork ourselves because we think that doing more is being more productive. Okay, Janvi?
All right, I think that's it for today's episode, guys. We would like to thank Sai Hefli for being here with us and sharing his insights on enhancing education during this pandemic. We would also like to thank our viewers for participating. Hope you guys learned a lot from us.
Okay,
If you miss an episode of that series,
so go. Sorry, go ahead.
check out our YouTube channel to watch past recordings of Tech Talks. So we will be sending the link of the YouTube channel in the comment section down below so that you can follow it.
Okay, and so for you, Sai, do you have anything to promote, anything else to say before we end the call?
That's all I've got. Thanks so much for having me on today. It was a really good time.
Yeah, it was a pleasure having you, and we really learned a lot. And as college students, we could really relate to everything that you said, and it would really shed light to our decisions in the coming semester. So thank you again for coming today, and we hope to see you in the next one. Thank you, Sai, for making time to go today. So that's all, and that concludes our series for today.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Bye. Thank you.